Hello and welcome to the next episode in the Innate Ability and Health podcast. Very excited to share some information with you today. We're going to get right down into taking a look at how to break free from things that may be holding you back in your life, in your health, in your happiness. And we're going to start with a very simple step that I think will make a lot of sense to most people. So I want to start with a quote. This is from Mark Twain, and he said, "Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect." So that's a really powerful statement, and that has been restated over the years. I picked that quote because most of us know who Mark Twain is, but it's been restated since, ancient Greek philosophers stated similar concepts, and all the way up into your modern day entrepreneurs who talk about taking life by the horns and doing things your own way, etc. Right? So this concept may not be new to you, but I want to really help you dig in and find out how you can use that concept to look at your life and look at the things that you're maybe thinking with and change them. And I'm not telling you what to think. I'm just telling you that you need to think for yourself in order to get to the optimal state of health and happiness and success. And behind that thinking needs to be self-determined. It needs to be on your own terms. Not so much because we want everybody to be self-determined because it makes people happy or whatever, but you will not actually get the results you want in life regarding your health and your happiness and your success if you're not self-determined about what you're thinking. And sometimes it's insidious. There's so much media put out there and authorities say this and everybody seems to agree this, that you just find yourself naturally thinking these things. And it's kind of like a covert brainwashing activity almost, right? So we want to make sure you're not falling into that trap. So let's take a look at how most people accept information. This isn't to say that you're 100% guilty of this, but all of us, I think, fall into this trap a bit to some degree. So the first way that most people accept information is because of authority. Somebody with a lot of letters, maybe like a PhD or an MD after their name, says, this is the way it is. And even if you don't understand everything you're saying, you think that, oh, it must be that way because that's what that person does for a living. And it stops you from taking a look and seeing if that is really the way it is for you, right? Because you are the best judgment of how things are for you, period. And the other way that people accept information commonly is group agreement. And this isn't to say we agree with some unruly mob, but I'm just saying the acceptable things we find in life. Everybody should follow a certain path in life in order to be happy. Maybe that's not the path that's going to make you happy. Everybody should eat their veggies and fruit and grains and whatnot in order to be healthy, right? That may not be what makes you healthy. Everybody is different. Everybody's unique. But if you have these things in place where you're using authority and you're using what's agreed upon to live your life, then it's likely you're missing out on some things. You haven't found the best options for yourself. And sometimes it's really hard. So let's be real. We have to survive in this economic situation we find ourselves in where we have to work, make a certain amount of money. And unless you happen to be in a position where you're making more than you need or you're independently wealthy or that requires a lot of energy to keep up with just that, the day to day. So you may not have a lot of time to sit down and reevaluate what's going on in the world. You may have to just go with things, and that's fine. You want to carve out some time as you go along and start looking at things on your own and allow yourself to become aware of some of the possibilities that maybe what you've been told about health or accomplishment or happiness or the way things work isn't exactly the way things work, right? So let's take a look at this a little more, okay? So to help make this sink in, sometimes we get into a position where we're going for some sort of situation with our health and we're not sure why it keeps coming up. Maybe we have gastrointestinal trouble, or we constantly have some sort of pain going on, and we take drugs for it, we take supplements for it, we change our style of living for it, we exercise more, whatever we do. But we miss the entire thing of people tend to have more trouble with their health when they're not happy. And this is a simplicity that people just say, well, everybody knows that. Well, if everybody knows that, why don't everybody just change their emotional state and stop having as much trouble with their health? Well, because there's no technology exactly to do that. Well, how do I do it? You just be happier. Well, that doesn't really answer the question, right? But what is something that answers the question? Well, if you're doing what you want to be doing in life, you're following a purpose that you want to be following, and you're engaging on a day-to-day basis in actions that forward what you want to be doing in life, and you're enjoying it, it's a pretty good chance that you're going to feel happier. Your emotional state is going to be happier. And it's been found through many scientific studies now that when a person has a state of happiness, meaning they're interested in life, maybe they're cheerful, enthusiastic, maybe they have a strong desire to engage with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, their hormones balance. Studies about this have gone back to the 1950s. Right? And when your hormones are balanced, your state of health tends to be pretty optimal, right? Hormones run what goes on with your body. So that's just on the physical level. And then on the interaction and relationship level, when you're happy and you're feeling good about yourself, you're more likely to be outgoing and engage with the people around you, whether that's your immediate family, your spouse, or your friends, right? Or your coworkers. And that makes life better too. So it is really as simple sometimes as sitting down and going, okay, well, am I doing things that align with what I want to be doing in life? And then, okay, sometimes it's not a perfect world. We do have to make compromises. Well, I need this much money, so I have to work at this job. It's not really my optimal job. Okay, how can we increase what you're doing in life so that it does align with what you want to be doing? Maybe we can take a little time on each weekend and you dedicate that towards doing whatever that project is. You know, maybe it's becoming a runner. You've wanted to do that, or it's learning how to paint, or it's helping the community, improve the community, right? Everybody has different purposes. But you can get on this kind of hamster wheel situation where you're just running and running and running, and you're following the conventional mold of, you know, if I have a family and I, you know, follow the job exactly and I treat people well, then everything will be great and I will be happy. And what next thing you find out, that doesn't necessarily happen, right? You don't have enough time to do what you want to do with your family, and the boss at the job makes the job miserable, and whatever else may be occurring. And next thing you know, you're in a poor state of health and a poor state of mind. And it's all because you haven't aligned things. And people struggle with health and happiness because they simply haven't aligned their life. And that is such a simplicity, but it is so true and so powerful. So again, if you're in this situation where you're thinking, well, everybody knows this, or Professor Snodgrass said blah, 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 and therefore it must be true, and yet you find yourself not being as happy as you could be, or as healthy or successful, then step back and go, okay, that's maybe not true. Look for other answers. But the first step is you got to realize that there's a possibility that being in agreement with everybody, even if they're people who are quote unquote healthy and they look really good on YouTube or Instagram or wherever you're watching them, that's really not a good way of evaluating things. You have to evaluate it for yourself. What is true for you, right? So imagine yourself in a state where you're doing really well and everything's optimal, right? And then walk yourself back from that. That is a really simple way of doing this, right? And as you walk yourself back from, okay, here's my optimal situation, health-wise, family-wise, career-wise, whatever else wise you want to put in there. Even write that down. Use that as your stable guide to taking a look at it, evaluating things. Is this thing that's accepted to be true about, you know, how you're supposed to treat others working for me? No. Okay, good. Then that doesn't become a part of the thing that supports your ideal situation in life, where you want to be and how you want to be, right? It really does come down to simply taking a look at what it is you want in life, what are your purposes, and what is your ideal setup, and then evaluating everything else against that, not against what is majority accepted or what the authorities say, right? Get the difference there. And this is very important. So if you were to go, here are the things I want to do in life. Here's the ideal way I want my life to be operating on a day-to-day basis. And here's something long-term. And then you use those things to evaluate whether exercising was going to work for you, right? And you use those things to evaluate whether you wanted to prioritize more time at work or with the family. Not because you read something in Cosmopolitan that says a professor studied many people and found that if you do blah, 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 then you will most likely feel better about yourself. Right? No, okay, that doesn't work. Make your own evaluations. You're an intelligent person, and evaluate it against your own purposes and your own state that you want to be in, your ideal state that you want to be in, right? Don't evaluate it against authorities or what everybody else seems to say. Hopefully this makes sense. But it's really important. The first step really in getting to that state that you want to be in, whether it's optimal health, happiness, success, it should be a combination of all of them, is to sit back and reflect on what it is that you're using to run your life. Are you just doing things based on what authorities say and what the majority says, or are you actually looking for yourself, coming to your own conclusions and using other people's information as support, but throwing it out if it doesn't align with what you are evaluating and looking at, right? And that's where the journey to true health and success begins. It's not with a step of reading another book that somebody else wrote and figured out something about, right? It's not to say you may not get amazing things out of there, but they will not become valuable to you unless you evaluate them for yourselves. So the way you want to come to a conclusion on a piece of information is to read it and then see if it's true for you by looking at it yourself and seeing if you can apply it in your life. And only if it's true for you and you evaluate it to be true, is it then true? It doesn't matter how many scientific quote unquote studies can be done. Not to put a negative spin on anything, but a lot of these studies are financed by people who want a certain outcome. And unfortunately, they get that outcome and then it's promulgated through different magazines, the internet, etc. Right? So you have to learn to think for yourself. And that's the first step towards health and happiness. If you have any questions, I would love to hear back from you. And again, if you have any wins or gains, I'd love to hear about them as well. Thank you and have a great day.